Jets up to the 30, the 20, 10, 5. Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
48-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to pin it in a row. It does. Rowe stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wins. Incredible effort for Rowe.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. College football is back, baby. We just had week 1, and we're here to bring you G5 college football coverage that you love each and every week. I am Luke Probasco, and I am joined by my co-host this way, Justice. Justice, how was your Labor Day weekend?
It's been pretty good. Watching that intro, like Ashton Genty, give him 6 has a totally new meaning this week, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, give him 6 touchdowns.
No, give him 6, like give him 6 times.
I was out with the family. I guess you would call it a glamping trip. Kid has been wanting to go camping. He wants to, go go camping out in a tent next. So we're going to do that for his birthday here soon. So I did not get to watch as much as I would like to week 1, but I got as much up to date that I could. I asked some questions, reached out to beat reporters about some injuries. So we're going to have that for you coming up soon.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a home game for Old Dominion, but obviously I spent a lot of time watching the Old Dominion game. The rain delay, thunder delay, whatever it was, certainly didn't help like get me back to being able to watch other games. But ODU had a watch party that I went to, and it was pretty cool. I got to meet some players' families, and they had raffles. They had a full-sized helmet autographed by Ricky Ronnie. Unfortunately, I did not win that. The guy sitting next to me won it. Kind of a bummer, but
and then you just had to look at it the rest of the time,
right? Well, they didn't give it to him till the very end, so
okay.
that was like the last prize. But no, it was a good weekend, and had fun. And I feel like I spent like the last 2 days doing nothing but getting our templates ready for today's show and graphics, and so hopefully it won't take me as long next week to get everything done. But yeah, man, it's been good. It's been fun, and college football's back. Love it. It's going to be gone before we know it. Hi to Billy. What's going on, Billy? Glad you could join us again. Always one of our loyal listeners and supporters, and we greatly appreciate it. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. We're doing good on YouTube. We're crossed the 400 follower mark. Now we're on to 500, and to the moon, man, right to the moon. And good things coming. We did an interview last week. I did an interview last week with Dylan Goffney, wide receiver from Colorado State. That dropped this morning. You and I did another interview today with the player that'll release sometime towards the end of the week. Man, just lots of stuff going on.
Lots of things to be excited for.
All right. So that's kind of do it for like what I would characterize our general college football talk. Now we are specifically going to be talking college fantasy football, and we're going to kind of get into our waiver wire picks from week 1. This segment will be probably much bigger tonight than it will ever be, right? When you say, Luke, because week 1, so much changes after week 1 in terms of pickups, and so things are going to look drastically different next week. There won't be as many guys to talk about. But just for FYI, we're looking at guys that are 30% owned or less. So if they're above that 30% threshold, we don't mention them. If they're below that 30% threshold, that's kind of the guys we're mentioning. And, first up is going to be the quarterbacks. We're going to go quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And so why don't you kick us off there with the quarterbacks, Luke? You're on mute, Luke.
Mute button got me. Let's go with Gio Lopez, South Alabama, 23% owned. He had 49 attempts in week 1, 432 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Great performance. We talked about him previously in the 20 for 20 group. Another guy that we talked about in the 2020
I was
20
just
for
saying
20 group.
one thing with Lopez. I mean, I was kind of shocked when I was putting this together that he wasn't over the 30% threshold. I think people just got scared off because of the the poor performance in the spring game, right, where he didn't complete a pass, and then there were some murmuring rumblings in one of the scrimmages that he didn't look that great. But man, like he maybe he's just the guy that turns it on when the lights are on, right? Because the 2 times he started, he has played outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the other guy in our 2020 guy was JC French, Georgia Southern, 1% owned, so he is widely available. Again, 50 pass attempts, 322 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Absolute beast on the ground as well. Devin Dampier, a guy that did not make our list, but he plays for New Mexico, 14%. He had 9.5 rushing attempts per game, not including sacks. So that's a guy to keep an eye out for.
They really unleashed him this week, man. Like it was awesome to see.
It was. I don't want to say night and day difference, but I want to say night and day difference when it comes to the rushing. And this was kind of what when I wrote some stuff for fan tracks and whatnot, talking about Dampier being a dark horse candidate for, like, John Lobb does these 24 top quarterbacks, and this guy being outside his top 24 wasn't even ranked. This is kind of what I had in mind with a Bronco Mendenhall type quarterback. But yeah, then we've got 1% owned Owen McCowan. Again, I think maybe what kept people off was not knowing if he had the job or not, and then, hey, how would they look? And they look pretty good. Kirk Francis is another guy, 0% owned. Tulsa, like I said, the future looks bright for Tulsa. 299 yards passing, 4 touchdowns.
That Tulsa offense was humming, and yeah, I like we've said many times, we expect big things from them here in 2024.
And then we've got Ethan Vasco, 19 attempts, but he had 12 completions for 249 yards. Coastal Carolina, 15% owned. And then Joey Labas, Central Michigan, 0% owned, probably because, no one knew who's going to win the job. Maybe thought it was going to be the other quarterback. Again, mentioned, why am I losing his name? It's right there on the tip of my tongue.
Bert Emanuel Jr.
Yep. So, looks like Joey might have this job. Did not threw 24 times for 342 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then we've got 2 guys that we mentioned in our G5, 20 for 20 in Jake Garcia, East Carolina, 0% owned. Ben Woldridge, Louisiana, 0% owned. Don't need to elaborate too much on them, as we talked about them in our 20 for 20 section. And then another guy, 0% owned. Hunter Watson, Sam Houston, probably not owned because people didn't listen to our Worker Bee series where I've been touting him, mentioning him a lot. And yeah, he gets the start there over the other Central Michigan transfer comes in, which I actually dug it a little bit into him. He's actually from my hometown, Ankeny, Iowa. Not Hunter Watson, but again, we're running late, and I am blanking on names. But the guy that went over there that we
Jace
thought,
Bauer.
Jace Bauer, actually from Ankeny, Iowa, where I am originally from. So how about that? Went to my high school. Yeah, Hunter Watson, a name to know for Sam Houston going forward. Justice, you want to take us through the running backs?
Yeah, I mean the running back landscape is always super thin, and so I'm just going to preface this here now. Pretty much, this is what we did last year, and it's pretty much what we're going to do this year. When guys have dual eligibility, running back and receiver, we're going to mention them with the running backs because there's plenty of receivers to talk about. Running backs gets really thin and really quick, and so those dual eligibility guys, running back / receivers, we're going to be mentioning them here with the running backs. First up, Anthony Tyus, 0% owned on Fantrax. He is going to be a extremely popular waiver wire ad this week. For me personally, I'm steering clear because I think folks are gonna. Most of my leagues are you got to spend money, you got a budget, and I think folks are going to go nuts for Tyus, and I'm not going to be willing to spend the amount of money it's going to require to win him, and so I'll be using my funds elsewhere.
Would
In
you
terms of running backs?
would you say like 30% of your budget absolutely tops that you'd be willing to go for Anthony Tyus, or is that way too
I wouldn't
high?
even go that high, personally. I mean, because somebody's going to go crazy, and so
Well,
I really
but like, what's like if you were to put a waiver wire bid on him and you were to win him, like what's the most amount of money that you would want to spend in your budget?
um
Because like running back is super thin, so like I
It
would
is
say like
super
if
thin. I mean,
like
I
I
can
would say
see
if somebody wants,
I can see 30%. I guess I probably wouldn't do that, but I don't think it's unreasonable. But somebody's probably going to spend 60%, fifty
yeah,
percent, and
absolutely.
it's way more than I would be willing to spend. But somebody's going to do it. I guarantee you. Next up, this one. This is probably more of a dynasty play or a potential injury to Ashton Jeanty. But Sire Gaines had an outstanding, he's a true freshman. He's been getting hyped up all off season, spring camp, fall camp. And he looked good when he got his opportunities this past week. I will say this though, Breezy Dubar did not play. He's still recovering from an injury. And so I don't, if you're going after Sire Gaines, you got to be doing that for a future, right? You got to be in a dynasty league. That's got to be a future play, because if something were to happen to Ashton Jeanty, I don't know that you should not expect the same kind of production from Gaines, but it's probably going to be both Gaines and Dubar once Breezy Dubar gets back there for the Boise State Broncos. Next up, Floyd Chalk, 10% owned. He's the second highest on this list. But yeah, I mean, I personally would probably be more comfortable spending more money on Floyd Chalk than Tyus, just because I feel like Floyd Chalk's probably a safer bet. Um, Tyus probably has the ceiling though, so I don't know. I guess depends on what you're looking for. But Floyd Chalk looked good there in week one. We talked about him numerous times tonight. Next up, this one is another kind of like Sire Gaines. It'll come with a warning label, if you will. That's Miles Bailey, Central Michigan, 0% owned. Had a great week one. But it should be noted, as we mentioned in our news and notes section, that Marion Lukes was out, did not play. And I expect both of these guys to get a lot of run, get a lot of carries here for the Central Michigan Chippewas. And so, I don't know that I would be going after Miles Bailey unless we heard, not aggressively anyway, unless for some reason we heard that Marion Lukes was going to be out for an extended period of time, which we have not heard to this point. And then the guy that's the highest owned of the running backs we're going to talk about, and he's really a receiver. He's actually a receiver on the roster. He's a starting receiver on the team. But in Fantrax, he has dual eligibility, running back and receiver. So we're going to talk about him here, and that's Trayon Sibley for Liberty. He was the leading receiver this week for Liberty. And so, if you're in a PPR league, these running back / receivers, they can prove valuable. If you're in a PPR league, where you're getting 1 point per reception, and then their versatility, right? Because you can play them at running back or receiver, and so it kind of helps in terms of managing roster spots. Next up, Seth McGowan. If you're saying the Oklahoma Seth McGowan, it is the Oklahoma Seth McGowan. He left Oklahoma. He was at JUCO last year, and now he has resurfaced for New Mexico State. Shared backfield, but Seth looked good in his chances. I think he had like 11 carries, just over 100 yards and a touchdown. He's also 0% owned. He's got. I mean, if I'm going to bet, I'd rather take a low cost bet on Seth McGowan than a high cost bet on Anthony Tyus, just because of the cost involved, right? I think Seth McGowan, he's got that pedigree. He showed what he can do here in week 1. The question is, can he take control of that backfield? I think it's possible. And I think what you're going to have to give up to get Seth McGowan is super reasonable. And so, like, he's someone I'd rather take a shot on him per se than like an Anthony Tyus, just because of the cost involved. Next up, Jalen John, UMass. We've seen productive running backs from UMass. Kieran Adams, Lynch, went over to Michigan State. Looks like the better running back there at Michigan State, but he left that void, and Jalen John seems to kind of have picked that up and kind of run with it. And like I said, we've seen UMass running backs be productive in the past. So Jalen John's another one to kind of take a look at. And then these last two guys kind of fall in that Trayon Sibley mode. They both have dual eligibility. The first one is Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas is listed on the UTEP roster as a minor back. And so that's a running back / wide receiver hybrid. But he does most of his damage through the air. I think he had 7 catches, 70 some odd yards, and a touchdown in week 1. And so, that's good production if you're in a PPR league. And then the last one here is someone he was mentioned as the breakout player on our Worker Bee series for the South Florida Bulls, and he is a running back. They have used him at receiver some, but he started his career as a running back, and he led South Florida in rushing here in week 1, and that's Kelly Joyner. And so again, dual eligibility. He's also 0% owned, as is Cam Thomas. And so these dual eligibility guys kind of can help you save some roster spots there for running backs. And so again, a couple of them aren't true running backs, but they have running back eligibility here in Fantrax. Let's move over to the wide receivers. What do you got for the wide receivers, Luke?
The mute button will not get me this time. Wide receiver, Damon Ward, North Texas, 29% owned. Nick Nash, San Jose State, 23% owned. Both mentioned in our.
I don't think we'll be talking about either one of these guys on this segment next week.
We will not at all.
I will be shocked.
A guy that I believe we will be talking about next week, because I don't think people like his usage yet, but that's Travion Rudolph, Northern Illinois, 18% owned. He went 4 for 4 for 104. He's a guy that you just want to get out in space and let him do his thing. University of Northern Illinois is going to be running the ball quite a bit. They did sling it around quite a bit this week. It does kind of suck. He only got 4, receptions and the 4 targets. I mean, he did catch all of them. But yeah, 18% owned, 104 yards. Just think back. I think it was a game against Buffalo 2 years ago when he was a true freshman and had for like 230 yards receiving or whatnot on a Thursday night or Tuesday night MAC game. But yeah, then we've got Corey Rucker, Arkansas State, 11% owned. We talked about him in our 20 for 20 matchup. And I would like to highlight, like, any of these guys that are in our 20 for 20 and they're here in the waiver wire, that means they're getting the receptions, or that means they're getting the targets and getting yards. That means they got to catch the ball. So you're getting the targets, you're getting the receptions, you're getting the yardage. Kyrese White, or Rowan on Fantrax, is Kyrese Rowan, right?
Yeah, it's Kyrie's Rowan on Fantrax, but the roster and everything is Kyrie's White.
So just kind of FYI, Kyrie's Rowan on Fantrax, Utah State, 0% owned, 31.38 out. That is highest in the G5 with anyone who had four or greater amount of targets here in week 1. Again, a 20 for 20 guy, 0% owned. Isaiah Page at Old Dominion. Coleman Owen at Ohio, 0% owned. Devontae Ross at Troy, 0% owned. And Luke Floria at Kent State, 0% owned. All of those guys, Isaiah Page through Luke Floria, all 0% owned, all in our 20 for 20. If you want to take a wait and see approach, okay, out of those groups there, I'm most intrigued by Coleman Owen at Ohio, 0% owned. But yeah, that would be who I would look at in this whole group. I think I like Nick Nash more than Damon Ward. I don't know about you, Justice. There's just something about that San Jose State schedule that doesn't really scare me, that I feel pretty confident.
And I think there's more competition for balls at North Texas than there is at San Jose State as well. So yeah, I'm with you. I prefer Nick Nash over Damon Ward, and of this second group here, Coleman Owen would be my preference as well.
And then, like Wilson Roofing said earlier, and you mentioned earlier, there was the second
Landon Sides
out there for North Texas. Again, if you guys are watching us on YouTube, if you're watching us on X, feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat. We haven't seen anything in a while. Then we've got wide receiver Luke Wysong, New Mexico, 0% owned. I fully anticipate he will be on the verge of not being talked about next week or not being able to be talked about. The only thing that makes me think that we will talk about him next week is they have a bye week before going to Auburn, I believe. So he was just on the outside of the 2020 list, averaging 9 targets per game and 112 yards with an ADOT of 11.3. So a lot of things to like there for Luke Wysong. But again, if you're picking him up this week, then you've got a bye, then you've got Auburn. We'll see. Maybe it would be fine. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 there. He was the breakout in our Worker Bee series, but he's at 0% owned, so he is available. But again, if you're in a season-long league, and I think he's a senior, right? So it's just for this year. And
no, I think Wysong is not. I think. Well, he might be. He might be in terms of education, but I think in terms of eligibility, I think he has another year after this year.
So that's just like something to monitor. You might be wasting 2 weeks, at least one, because he's got to buy. So, Justice, what do we have for tight ends?
So tight ends is always very, very bleak in terms of fantasy. We do have 5 guys listed here, but I will tell you, Grayson Barnes is like he's the shining star of this group, and he's the only one that is double digit owned. He's owned in 14% of leagues, but he is the shining star. As I mentioned, he had 95 yards there in week 1, and the rest of these guys, they don't really excite me in terms of wanting to go add them anywhere. But if Grayson Barnes is available, he is the one that I would go out and add. The rest of these guys are probably going to be more of a wait and see approach, unless I'm super desperate for a tight end. Did you have anything
like
to
you
add there
mentioned,
on Barnes?
Barnes just had 10.66 ADOT. So, I mean, that's kind of like what we like to see for our number one wide receivers. So that's perfect. Like you said, 5 of 6, 5 receptions on 6 targets for 95 yards there in week 1.
Also joining Barnes here, we have Desirio Riles, East Carolina, 0% owned. He put up a big score, but off the top of my head, I want to say it was like 2 catches for like 40 yards maybe, and both of those were touchdowns. And so that's just that's not sustainable production, right? But I mean, maybe he will get things done there for the Pirates with Jake Garcia. His ADOT was a 17.3. Connor Vaughn, kind of the same thing. Connor Vaughn from Tulsa, kind of the same thing as Riles. I think he only caught 2 balls, but they both went for touchdowns. Again, you can't count on that. I mean, touchdowns is really what kind of makes and breaks tight ends, right? And so, it's nice to see them get 2 touchdowns, but I don't want to see 2 catches and 2 touchdowns out of my tight ends because you can't rely on that on a week-to-week basis. Connor Vaughn's ADOT was a 19.5. He's 0% owned. Dorian Fleming, we talked about him in our 2020 segment. He is 0% owned. He caught 5 of 6 targets. And then Eli Wilson. If I had to pick someone after Grayson Barnes, Eli Wilson's probably the one that would interest me the most. He's never going to like go crazy for you, but he's always going to catch a couple balls. He'd probably catch a touchdown every other week, maybe. And so I do think that Joey Aguilar looks to him in the red zone. So, if I was going to take a shot on someone other than Grayson Barnes among this group, Eli Wilson would be that one guy, and he is 9% owned in Fantrax. He caught 4 or 5 targets in week 1, but his average depth of target is less than 2 yards. And so again, like I said, it's the touchdowns for him, just like it is for any tight end. Tight end landscape is always scarce. So some of these guys, like Barnes and Wilson, maybe I would add. The other guys are probably going to be more along the line. So let's keep an eye on them. See what they can do here in week 2. Can they be more? Can they show some consistency, which is really kind of what you're looking for, I think, out of a tight end.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in week 2, as well as look forward to week 3 of the 2024 season. And as always, bring you up to date on the latest news and the happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on X, please give us a retweet, like, follow, and if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you all for your support, and until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.